A soldier stood on a battlefield, outnumbered, outgunned, and face to face with an alien queen who was supposed to be his enemy. But when assassins launched plasma arrows straight at her heart, he didn't hesitate. He threw himself in the way, choosing sacrifice over survival. What followed wasn't just a fight for peace. It was a fight to unite two worlds and stop a hidden enemy from destroying everything. If you're new here, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and show some love with a thumbs up by liking the video. Now, let's jump into the story. The red sands of Ramos III burned beneath the twin suns as Lieutenant Oren Vale crouched behind the remains of a shattered gunship. His armor was scorched, the air thick with dust and the stench of fire. Plasma bolts lit the sky in every direction, tracing deadly paths between ruined buildings and fallen towers. Explosions echoed through the mining colony, but Oren had stopped flinching. After 6 hours of non-stop fighting, your nerves either broke or turned to stone. He had chosen the latter. Behind him, civilians huddled in underground shelters, men, women, children, those who hadn't made it off-world before the Keller invaded. The colony hadn't stood a chance. The Keller outnumbered the human defenders 4-1. Their weapons were sleek, alien, terrifying. Their armor seemed to bend light, and their soldiers moved like shadows through the dust. But still, Oren and his unit held the line. Not because they thought they'd win, but because losing wasn't an option. "Lieutenant!" A voice crackled. Over the coms. It was Sergeant Mara Dalen, ducking behind another wreck not far away. "Command says there's a Keller vessel requesting to land. Claims it carries Queen Maelia. They're asking for a ceasefire." Oren's jaw tightened. Queen Maelia, the sovereign leader of the Keller Empire. Her name was whispered in briefings, always followed by rumors. She was a strategist, a mystic, a tyrant. Now suddenly she was here. He looked at the battlefield. Smoke curled into the sky. Bodies, both human and Keller, lay still in the dust. Could it be a trick? A distraction? "Tell them they can land," he replied. "But only in the neutral zone. And if anything looks off, we open fire. Understood?" "Yes, sir." Minutes later, the sound of a ship pierced the chaos, not the scream of a war vessel, but the deep hum of something slower, more graceful. From the smoke above, a gleaming silver craft descended like a falling star. It was unlike anything Oren had ever seen, smooth and seamless, as if carved from a single piece of moonlight. As it touched down, even the fighting paused. The battlefield fell into an eerie silence. The landing ramp extended. Soldiers raised their weapons. Oren stepped forward cautiously, pulse steady but alert. Then she appeared. Queen Maelia moved with the calm of someone who had nothing left to fear. She stood taller than any human, her skin pale gold with veins of glowing white light. Her eyes shimmered like galaxies ancient, unreadable. She wore a flowing robe that shifted colors like ripples on a pond, and a halo of soft energy floated above her head. Behind her stood a few guards, armored but not aggressive, and beside her Oren blinked a human. It was Dr. Kira Thorne, a diplomat who'd been declared missing 3 months ago. She walked freely, apparently unharmed, and nodded at Oren as if they were meeting for coffee instead of on a burning battlefield. "I've come to end the war," Queen Maelia said, her voice carrying across the ruined colony with perfect clarity. No translator, no device, just power. "Too much has been lost. I wish to speak." Oren didn't lower his weapon, but he stepped closer. "You'll have to convince more than me." "I intend to." Then, in the corner of his vision, something moved fast, sharp, wrong. 3 dark figures slipped through the shadows. They weren't Keller guards. Their armor was jagged, mismatched, their weapons crackling with unstable energy. Crossbow-shaped devices, glowing with blue plasma. His instincts screamed these weren't here for peace. Down! He shouted, already running. The queen hadn't noticed. Her guards were just beginning to react. Orin knew he wouldn't reach them in time, but he didn't stop. 1, 2, 3 bolts fired. The assassins had aimed with deadly precision chest, head, spine. Death in under a second. But Orin moved faster than thought. He leapt between the queen and the arrows, his body, turning as the first bolt struck his chest with a burst of searing light. Pain tore through him, armor disintegrating. The second hit his shoulder, spinning him around. The third lodged deep into his thigh. He fell to the ground, breath ragged, vision fading. All around, the world blurred to red and white and shadow. Queen Maelia rushed to him, her eyes wide, her expression stunned. "Why would you do that?" she whispered, kneeling beside him. Her hands glowed with soft light as she pressed them against his wounds. Orin tried to speak, blood filling his mouth. He managed one phrase. Not enemies, just people who forgot how to listen. She looked at him not as a ruler, but as someone human someone moved. Around them, both Keller and humans had stopped fighting, their weapons lowered, watching in silence. The assassins were seized by Keller guards, dragged away shouting in a language Orin didn't know. "You will not die," the queen whispered. "Not after this." Her healing light pulsed brighter. The fire in Orin's body cooled just enough. He closed his eyes, her voice the last thing he heard. "When you wake, you will find the world changed." The battle for Ramos III had been a nightmare. But in that one moment, when a human soldier shielded an alien queen with his life, the war paused, and the first spark of peace was lit. Orin Vale floated in warm, glowing blue liquid. At first, he thought he was dreaming. Everything was quiet, peaceful, no gunfire, no alarms, no screaming. Just the sound of his own breath echoing inside a strange glass chamber. His body didn't hurt, but it didn't feel like his own either. He moved his fingers. They responded, slowly, but with strength that felt unfamiliar. The liquid wasn't water he could breathe in it, but it pulsed with energy, like it was a live dot. As his eyes adjusted, he saw shapes moving outside the chamber. Soft lights blinked across the walls. The room curved in ways human buildings didn't. Everything was smooth, seamless, almost like it had grown there instead of being built. Then a face appeared in front of him. Queen Maelia. Her golden features were softer now, her glowing eyes gentle. She placed a hand on the tank and spoke quietly. "You are safe now, Orin Vale." He tried to respond, but realized he couldn't speak in the liquid. She must have understood. With a soft gesture, she activated a control on the tank's side. Slowly, the fluid drained, and Orin felt his feet touch solid ground again. The tank opened with a soft hiss. He coughed, gasping air into his lungs. His legs shook beneath him, and Maelia offered her hand. He hesitated, then took it. Her hand was warm, real. "You shouldn't be alive," she said with a small smile. "But you are." Orin looked down at his body. The burns were gone. The wounds had healed. Silver lines traced across his chest, and limbs faint, glowing, slightly under the soft lights. "What did you do to me?" Maelia led him to a floating platform that shaped itself into a chair beneath his weight. "Our healing technology doesn't just repair, it enhances. Your body is stronger now, faster. Your cells have adapted to our treatments. You are still human, but different." He didn't know what to say. Part of him was amazed. The other part, deeply unsettled. "So I'm a science experiment now?" "You're a symbol," came another voice. Orin turned to see a Keller woman entering the room. She had short, dark tendrils instead of hair, and wore robes covered in glowing symbols. "I'm Ine Kor, Royal Biohealer." I oversaw your recovery. Orin gave a slow nod. Appreciate the save. You saved our queen, she replied. I only returned the favor. Maelia sat across from him. Your actions on Raunos 3 changed everything. Our troops stopped fighting. Human forces ceased. Fire, the image of a soldier risking everything to save his enemy, has spread across both sides. Some call you a traitor. Others a hero. But most, they are confused and curious. Orin rubbed the side of his head, trying to process everything. So what happens now? Is this where you say I'm the bridge between two worlds? Aine smiled faintly. Actually, yes. Before he could reply, the door opened again. A familiar face stepped through Dr. Kira Thorne, the missing diplomat. Orin blinked. You're alive? She walked up to him and nodded. Very much so. It's good to see you upright, Lieutenant. You were reported captured. I was, she said, but not by the Keller army. I was rescued from a rebel cell Keller extremists who want the war to continue at all costs. They don't answer to Queen Maelia. Orin frowned. The ones who tried to assassinate her? Kira nodded grimly. Same group. They have help. Someone's feeding them information and weapons. Maelia stood again, her voice calm but firm. We believe there is a third force, something hiding in the shadows, pushing our people to fight. This war, it was never meant to be ours. Orin's instincts as a soldier kicked in. You're saying someone's been manipulating both sides? Aine brought up a display of data streams and intercepted transmissions. Attacks have been timed too perfectly. Messages forged, locations leaked. Enough to spark battles, but not enough to win. Just enough to keep both sides bleeding. Orin stood, slowly but with more strength than expected. You think they want us to stay weak? Maelia met his eyes. Yes. We believe this unknown enemy plans to strike once we've exhausted ourselves. And why tell me all this? Because you are no longer just a soldier, Kira said gently. You're the one person both humans and Keller might listen to know. That thought struck Orin harder than any plasma blast. He hadn't asked for any of this. He wasn't a politician. He was a fighter. Someone who followed orders and protected those behind him. But the moment he stepped in front of those arrows, he had stepped into something much larger. So what now? He asked, voice quiet. Maelia extended her hand. Now we work together. We uncover who's pulling the strings. And we stop them before our worlds fall. Orin looked at her hand for a long moment. Then, slowly, he reached out and took it. The war hadn't ended. But something new had begun, and between breaths and stars, hope stirred again. Orin Vale stood on the observation deck of the Keller command ship, staring out at the sea of stars. They seemed peaceful, distant, silent, but he knew better. Somewhere out there, something was watching. Not the Keller. Not humanity. Something worse. It had no flag, no face. No name anyone had dared speak aloud, but it had power. And it had purpose. That purpose, they had discovered, was to keep the war alive. Since waking from his healing, Orin had spent every day digging through reports, intercepted transmissions, and forgotten clues. With Dr. Kira Thorne and Royal Healer Aine Kor at his side, he had seen the puzzle come together, bit by bit, ugly and terrifying. The evidence was clear. Someone had been planting false data, staging attacks, and feeding both sides lies. To keep the fighting going. This war wasn't just a tragedy. It was a trap. Queen Maelia entered the room, her calm presence grounding. She looked at Orin with a quiet strength. Another world fell today, she said, voice steady. One of ours. A colony that had nothing to do with the front lines. Human or Keller weapons? Orin asked. Neither, she said. Same energy signature as the attack on Ramos 3. Same strange readings in the wreckage. No survivors. He exhaled, fists tightening. They're speeding up. Kira joined them, carrying a datapad filled with red warnings. They want us to fall apart before we figure out what they are. It's not just about weakening us. It's about stopping unity before it starts. A few days later, Orin stood inside a massive council chamber on the neutral planet of Delern, a rare place where humans and Keller dared meet face to face. The air buzzed with tension. Soldiers glared across the room. Diplomats whispered. No one trusted anyone. But everyone had come. That, in itself, was a miracle. Orin stepped forward to speak. He wasn't a politician. His voice wasn't polished. But it carried weight, because everyone had seen what he'd done on Ramos 3. And when he spoke, they listened. This war, he began, was started by someone none of us can see. Not your people, not mine. An enemy hiding behind every message, every battle, every lost city. They are using us like pieces on a board, and the more we bleed, the closer they come. Murmurs filled the room. A few voices scoffed, but many were silent, listening. I know what it's like to lose trust, Orin continued. To be told over and over that peace is impossible, that we're too different, that our blood is too angry, too proud, too old to ever mix. But I also know what it's like to stand in front of death for someone you were supposed to call your enemy. And I know what comes after. Queen Maelia stepped beside him. The only way forward is together, she said. If we continue to fight each other, we will fall. But if we unite, we may still have a chance. The council erupted into chaos. Some Keller leaders accused her of betrayal. Human generals claimed it was a trap. The alliance nearly shattered before it began. Then, out of nowhere, a sharp sound rang out. A beam of energy shot across the chamber. Screams followed. Orin turned in time to see Kira shove Commander Nevos, a Keller military leader, out of the way. The beam struck her in the back, and she collapsed without a sound. Silence dropped like a hammer. Orin ran to her side, kneeling. In disbelief, Kira's eyes fluttered, and her lips moved, but no words came. She was gone. The weapon had cut too deep, too fast. Guards tackled the attacker, a human extremist who had infiltrated the security team. His mission had been clear. Stop the peace. At any cost. As Kira's body was carried away, Orin stood slowly, eyes filled with a storm of grief and fury. She gave her life for one of yours, he said, voice shaking. Just like I gave mine once for your queen. How many of us have to die before we realize we're on the same side? No one answered. Queen Maelia stepped forward again. The enemy fears our unity. That's why they send assassins. That's why they plant lies. But we have a choice. We can keep giving them what they want, or we can rise above what they expect. After hours of silence and slow discussion, one by one, the leaders began to agree. Not all of them, not completely, but enough. An alliance was born, shaky, scarred, and unfinished, but real. Weeks later, on a ship unlike any other, Orin stood on the bridge of the newly built Unity Vale. It was the first vessel designed by both humans and Keller. It carried the markings of two civilizations, two armies, two stories now tied by loss and hope. Maelia joined him, looking out at the growing fleet assembling beyond the glass. We've done something that was once unthinkable, she said. But we've only just begun, Orin nodded. The pain of Kira's death hadn't faded. It wouldn't, but her sacrifice had lit a fire that no enemy could put out. Now we find the ones hiding behind the curtain, he said, and we show them what real unity looks like. The stars stretched before them, beautiful, endless, and full of danger. But for the first time in a long while, they did not face it alone. The stars shimmered quietly as the Unity Veil moved through the dark. Orin Vale stood at the heart of the ship, surrounded by lights, maps, and voices from two worlds working as one. It had taken blood, loss, and unthinkable choices to reach this moment. He looked at the fleet outside his window-human ships, with their angular design and raw power. Keller vessels with elegant curves and glowing energy cores. They were no longer separate forces. Now, they moved together, trained together, thought together. The enemy they had feared for so long had finally revealed itself. The ones behind the false messages, the ambushes, the fear, they called themselves the Varanth. Not a species, not truly, more like a presence. Machines and minds mixed into something that watched from the coldest corners of space, feeding off conflict like a disease. The Varanth didn't conquer with armies at first. They made enemies of allies, twisted peace into suspicion, and waited. Always waiting. But this time, they had waited too long. Orin had changed since Ramos III. His body still bore the silver. Scars from the plasma bolts, but they weren't just reminders of pain. They were reminders of the choice he had made. And they glowed now whenever he stood near Kellertech, whenever the fleet sensed together. Whatever Maelia's healing had done to him, it had left him half human, half something new. He could hear both languages without needing to translate. He could think in both tactical styles. And now, more than ever, he was the bridge they needed. Queen Maelia entered the command deck, her robe dimmed to the soft blue she wore during times of decision. Her eyes met Orin's, and for a moment, the war fell away. "The fleet is ready," she said simply. "All systems linked, neural channels sensed. If we're going to make our move, it must be now." Orin gave a short nod. "Let's do what they never expected, fight as one." The order went out across the armada. Human and Keller ships paired off, combining strength and strategy. Fighters from Earth were fitted with Keller shielding. Keller cruisers used human targeting systems. Every ship became part of something bigger, like limbs of a single being. And at its center stood the Unity Veil. As they approached the edge of known space, the Varanth finally moved. A fleet emerged from the void huge. Silent, shaped like jagged shards of night. They didn't glow. They absorbed light, sound, even gravity. It felt like the stars themselves pulled away from them. On the main screen, the enemy ships formed a wall stretching for hundreds of kilometers. The first strike came fast. Varanth. Weapons bent space, slicing through metal with no sound. A human scout ship vanished in seconds. Another followed. But then the unified fleet responded not with panic, but with purpose. Orin gave the signal, and the coordination began. Keller shields adapted to the Varanth blasts. Human pilots used unpredictable maneuvers, drawing enemy fire into traps. Orin's voice guided both sides. His thoughts translated instantly through. The neural system Maelia had helped develop. The battle was like nothing ever seen. Ships didn't just move, they danced, shifting in time with one another. Explosions lit the darkness, but so did unity. One Keller vessel was about to be overwhelmed until a human cruiser surged forward, intercepting the blast. In another corner of the battlefield, human Marines landed on a Varanth outpost, but Keller engineers joined them, disabling its defenses with energy waves only they understood. But the Varanth weren't just powerful. They were smart. They adapted. They learned. Soon, it was clear. The fleet was winning battles, but not the war. Then, Aine Kor appeared on the screen from the medical bay, her face pale with realization. "We found something in the Varanth systems," she said quickly. "They're vulnerable to emotion." Orin frowned. "What do you mean?" "They process logic, patterns, numbers. But emotional signals, grief, hope, compassion, they confuse their targeting systems. It overloads their decision pathways. Maelia understood immediately. Your sacrifice, your healing, the unity it caused, that's what breaks them. Orin didn't hesitate. Broadcast it. Using Keller memory tech and human archive feeds, they pulled the full memory of that moment on Ramos 3 when a soldier jumped in front of 3 arrows to save a supposed enemy. They broadcast it fleet-wide. But more than that, they broadcast it directly into the Varanth's communic spectrum. The response was instant. The enemy formation staggered. Movements turned sloppy. Ships began to slow. Some even turned on one another, unable to process what they were receiving. The unity they tried so hard to prevent was now their undoing. The fleet pressed forward. With each attack, each rescue, each joint effort, the broadcast grew stronger, pulsing with the message. We are not divided. We are one. At last, the Varanth retreated into the dark, their weapons silent. For the first time in known history, they fled. The silence that followed was not just relief, it was a turning point. Months passed, repairs were made, treaties signed. A new station, the Horizon Assembly, was built by both species to serve as the capital for a growing alliance. Orin stood on its central balcony, looking down at crowds of humans in Keller, gathered to celebrate the first Unity Day. His name was now known across systems, not as a war hero, but as the man who jumped in front of 3 arrows and changed the future. Maelia stood beside him, smiling. When stars remember names, she said quietly, it means the galaxy has learned something worth keeping. And Orin, the soldier who once only knew how to fight, nodded. He had given his pain to peace. And peace had given something beautiful in return.